It is so ridiculously bright where I usually film like a foot away from me, so we moved. You can still see pretty much everything in the background. It's fine, it's whatever. I have another scary story for you guys, and I realized that I didn't say that in my last video. Like, I didn't say that in my last 2 videos, I don't think. That's how messed up I am. Honestly, I'm just gonna get right into the story. This has 3 parts, so I'm gonna try to get through all 3 of them. I'm still a little bit sick, so I'm coming off of that, but I think we can do it. So this story is called It Was More Than a School Shooting. I've decided to make my experience public because I don't want it to be lost. I'm more than certain that what happened that Friday afternoon was all a part of some carefully calculated plan. I know I'm being a bit vague, but a lot happened that day, and a few words isn't going to give you the whole story. I won't be naming the school where the tragedy took place, and I'll explain why later in the story. So, it all started with me walking to my next class after coming from lunch. English was always one of my favorite classes because there were only 7 students in the class, including me. There was also this girl that I liked in there. I never really talked to her though. We only talked if she needed help with her work or something like that. In all honesty, I didn't even know if she considered me a friend or just someone to get answers from. But I guess it doesn't matter now. After getting about 15 minutes into a lesson I still can't remember, I heard a loud bang, and the entire class froze, looking at the door. My ears were ringing. About a minute passed when the intercom came on. I didn't recognize the voice. Usually the principal or staff would use it, but not this time. The voice simply said, "Step 1 complete." I didn't know what to do. I just sat at my desk, never taking my eyes off the door. I then heard screaming coming from the other classes. That must have snapped me out of my trance because I remember hiding behind the teacher's desk. A second or 2 later, my crush, Alyssa, and someone whose name I can't seem to remember joined me. I didn't know where the other 4 students were hiding, and I didn't care. I only cared about my own well-being. That was the first time I'd actually felt my life was in danger. My body was full of adrenaline. I heard someone trying to open the door, and I almost screamed, but I managed to stay silent. There was a female voice from the other side. She said frantically, "Let me in, please let me in." I couldn't tell if the voice belonged to a student or a teacher, but I could make out what they said clearly, which unnerved me because the teacher's desk was on the other side of the class. You'd have to speak pretty loud for me to hear from that distance. I realized that there was another feeling in the pit of my stomach. Through the fear I felt, there was a strong sense of dread. I couldn't stop thinking about why this girl was speaking so loudly. Was she trying to get us caught? I then started thinking about how the girl had to get to our classroom. Why wasn't she in her own class? If she went to use the bathroom when all this started, she would have to go to the 2nd floor because the 1st floor bathrooms were under construction. My class is at the end of the hall, and the bathrooms are towards the middle. She would have passed plenty of classes. Why didn't she go to one of them? Maybe she was on the stairwell at the end of the hall when it happened and ran back down. I didn't get to finish thinking because I heard the door open. I'm pretty sure it was the teacher. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It all happened so fast. The 3 of us jumped when we heard the first one. We didn't move or make a sound after that. Alyssa was silently sobbing next to me, so I put my arm around her. The other student was wiping tears from his eyes. I just stared blankly into space. I didn't know what to think. I know what I heard. My ears were still ringing, yet I didn't feel sad or even scared. It was a feeling of complete hopelessness. After a few seconds or minutes, I can't remember, we heard the door open and close. Frank was his name, I just remembered. Maybe it's not too late. Anyway, Frank was first to get up. His facial expression said it all. It was a mixture of terror and disgust. Looked like he was about to throw up. Alyssa was leaning on me, still silently sobbing, which was now accompanied by the occasional sniffle. "Hey, James, Alyssa, we need to get out of here," Frank said in a whisper. I should have questioned him. I should have asked him why don't we stay in the class, but I didn't. I wasn't even thinking about it. After about 5 minutes, Alyssa stopped crying, and we got up from under the desk. I still have nightmares about what I saw. I won't go into detail, but it was bad. And I was right to think the teacher was the one who opened the door, because his body was right next to the door. The teacher and the other students were all dead. I wanted to throw up, but I managed to hold it in. Alyssa didn't. She threw up on the floor. I gagged, but I managed to hold it in. We slowly made our way to the door. "We should go to the library," whispered Frank. "Why? We should head for the exit and get the hell out of here," I whispered back. "Think about it. We don't know if there's more than one person involved. And if there is, who says they're not waiting at the exits? I guess you're right." Frank slowly opened the door and looked out. He told us to follow him, and we did. The library was on the other side of the hall. It was quiet. The only noises that were being made were from us. I don't know if it was the adrenaline, but each step we took sounded so loud. Eventually we made it there without being seen. When we entered, I could feel eyes on me and hear whispers abruptly end. We just stood there, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, someone who looked to be in 9th grade, just like I was, came out from under a table and looked at us. He said in a trembling whisper, "Yeah, y'all are just students, right?" "Yeah," Frank said. "Is anyone else here?" "There's 5 others." "Can we hide with you?" "Sure." The student went back to his hiding spot. Frank went to hide alone while I followed Alyssa to her hiding spot. It was under a table. I noticed she didn't say a word after this whole thing started, so I wanted to make sure she was okay. I sat next to her and thought about what to say. "How are you feeling?" I asked. "I'm fine," she said, holding back tears. "Are you sure?" She started to tear up, so I put my arm around her again. Her tears dried up and she asked, "You want to know something?" "Yeah. I've always liked you, ever since we met in 8th grade." "Really?" I didn't know what else to say. "Yeah. I've always liked you too." I don't know how, but we both actually smiled. We even started giggling. We looked at each other for a while after that. She was so beautiful. Slowly, I leaned in and closed my eyes. She did the same. We ended up kissing. And after we were done, I couldn't stop smiling. At least some good would come from that day. That's what I thought, at least. The library door opened again. My heartbeat increased, but I thought it could be just another student looking for a place to hide. That thought calmed me a lot. I almost put my head up to see who was there. I was that confident that we weren't in any danger. Someone beat me to it, though. I'm sure it was the same student that greeted us. 1. We just sat there, frozen. I felt horribly, like this was somehow my fault. I know it wasn't, but that didn't stop the feeling. I then heard footsteps coming from every direction. I guess Frank was right to take us to the library. It was then that I finally realized something. Frank was always a quiet person, just like me, so it was sort of out of character for him. He was never a leader. He always did his work alone and barely talked to any of us unless it was absolutely necessary. It was probably the adrenaline rush. That's what I would have thought if I hadn't heard him say loud and clear, "Under the tables." I stayed completely still, not moving a single inch. Alyssa did the same. We heard the other students screaming. They were so loud. Those screams were then accompanied by the infamous bangs and then silence. I couldn't tell you how many there were, but I know it was definitely more than 5. "Is that all of them?" an unfamiliar voice said. "No, there's 2 more. I didn't see where they went, though," Frank said. "Let's find them then." They started to walk around, but we never moved. Even as they slowly crept closer to us, we stayed completely still. Fate must have been on our side that day because I heard a ringtone coming from them. "Hold up, Jay wants to talk to us," the unfamiliar voice said. "What about the 2 students in the—" "Shut up. You don't know if they can hear us." They started whispering to the point where I couldn't make out what they were saying. I did hear the last thing that Frank said. He said, "That's smart," and they left after that. I was still tense, though. I couldn't explain why, but Alyssa, on the other hand, looked so relieved. After about a minute of sitting there, Alyssa was about to get up. Before she could, I grabbed her and sat her back down because I realized why I was so tense. I heard footsteps all around me when they first came into the library. There was no way those footsteps just came from 2 people. But that's exactly how many people left the library. I whispered as quietly as possible, "I think there's more people in here." She nodded her head and we sat in silence for the next 10 minutes. Then I heard an irritated voice say, "Let's go, they must be dead or something." "All right, but help me plant this first," another voice said. This terrified me because right at that moment, I was just about to get up from under the table. Hearing those voices was like experiencing the most intense jump scare of my life. It took everything not to make any noise. Fate must have really been on my side that day. "We've already wasted too much time. Just turn it on, then we're leaving." "All right, it's done. Let's go then." My mind was full of questions that I still don't have answers to. I'm working on it, though. Alyssa snapped me out of it by asking, "You think it's safe to go now?" "Yeah, I doubt anybody else would be waiting for us." I was the first to get up from under the table. A few seconds later, Alyssa joined me. My back was aching. It felt good to finally get up and stretch. The first thing I did was go to where I heard the 2 unfamiliar voices. I heard their voices coming from the front of the library. There was a bomb. It was just sitting right on top of the front desk. I almost fainted just by staring at it. How did they get one of these?" Alyssa asked. I didn't answer though, because I'd already asked that question to myself along with many more. How many people are involved? Are there more of these bombs planted all around the school? Who is Jay? Who is the voice over the intercom? Hey, Alyssa said, we need to leave now. I'm pretty sure this bomb is active. I know. As we walked closer and closer to the door, the intercom came back on. Step 2 complete. I could make out the voice this time. The voice belonged to a male who was obviously an adult, maybe his 40s or 50s. It wasn't familiar though. Step 2 must be those bombs, said Alyssa. Yeah, we just need to get out of here. I slowly opened the door. The hall was completely empty and silent. Then we heard it. It wasn't a bang. It was so much louder, and I think it came from the 3rd floor. I heard windows shatter and screaming. Suddenly students from every class ran out. There were far too many students. There were hundreds of students pouring out of the classrooms and the stairwells. It may have only been for a split second, but I saw students leaving the English class we came from. I thought that door was locked. How many of those students were able to hide in there? And why was nobody else using the exits from the stairwells? They seemed to be heading for the front of the school, which you could only get to by going where the English class is and turning the corner. I was getting that feeling again. It was less noticeable, but it was still there. Alyssa grabbed my hand and ran. I couldn't stop thinking about why nobody was using the stairwell exits. I couldn't use them even if I wanted to because there were too many students trying to get out of the stairwell at the same time. We were in the middle of the hall when I stopped. I still couldn't figure out why this feeling manifested in the pit of my stomach, but the last 2 times it did, something bad happened. What's wrong? She yelled over the crowd. We should head for the exits on the stairwell. We can't, there's no space. I know, it's just that... Before I could finish, an arm grabbed her. She was loose from my grip now. Another arm grabbed her and she started moving towards the corner. I tried my absolute best to run after her, but I could barely move. I was being blocked by everyone. I even tried to force my way on top of the crowd, but I felt arms pull me back down. The feeling in my stomach only amplified. Who or what was waiting in that corner? It only took a second for that question to be answered. Bullets. That's what I was waiting for. I couldn't say Alyssa anymore, but I knew that it was already too late. I felt my heart explode inside of my body. I didn't even know that I cared for her that much. I know we've only known each other for a year, but the pain I felt in my chest was excruciating. It was like finding out that a loved one passed away. That's the only way I can describe it. I tried running back, but everybody only ran towards the bullets. I could see people dying right in front of me, and I was about to join them. That's when I felt someone grab my arm, and I was pulled into a classroom. I was only a few yards away from the corner, from those bullets. Hey man, are you all right? Asked an unfamiliar voice. No, I said with tears coming down my face. I couldn't hear the bullets anymore, but it didn't matter. You have any idea what's going on out there? I didn't respond. Listen, I just saved your life. Can you at least talk to me? I don't know what's going on. Okay, well, I was on my lunch break when all of this happened. I turned all my lights off and locked the door, and I hid under my desk. I know I should have went out there to help any students, but I was too scared, I guess. I sat there for a good 20 minutes when I heard that explosion, then screaming. I got up and saw students running, and then those guns. That's when I saw you trying to run back, but unable to. I couldn't just stand and watch. I had to do something. He took a long pause. How about you? I was in my English class. It's across the hall, is all I managed to say. I was too busy trying to comprehend what just happened. You got a name? James. I'm Mr. Stevens. We sat in silence after that. The intercom came on again. Step 3 complete. We're all done here, is what the voice said. We didn't move an inch. The police came a few minutes after that. What they found and what I saw only led to more confusion. Only 13 bodies were found, including Alyssa's. The 5 in my class, 6 in the library, 2 in the hall. Only 2. That wasn't possible. I never heard a sound while Mr. Stevens and I were sitting, but there was no way someone could have moved those bodies. But at the same time, I never looked out the door window. The bomb in the library was never found either. When I left the class, I could see the 2 bodies in the hall, which were both covered by sheets. My parents picked me up from school before the police could question me. I could see a massive hole on one side of the school while we're driving away. After we got home, my parents and I didn't talk much. I was so confused about that day. There were no news reports on it. When I finally built up the courage to finally say something, I said everything. I saw the expression on their faces. I could tell they didn't believe me. It took me to see a therapist a few days later. When we got to the building, it felt alien to me. I didn't belong there. I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. My parents had to fill out some paperwork first, and then we went into the office. "Good morning, my name is Miss Catherine," a voice said. "Good morning," my parents said, almost in unison. I stayed silent. "Please, sit down." After my parents and I sat down, my father began telling the therapist about everything I told him and my mother. She sat there taking notes. She then shifted her attention to me. "Have you been having any nightmares?" she asked in a concerned tone. I was, but I didn't say anything. I didn't want what I know I saw to be blamed on some nightmare. Maybe it would be best if you two left the room," she said, directed at my parents. "Okay," my father said. They left shortly after that, and it was just me and the therapist. "Could you explain everything that happened?" With a heavy sigh, I did just that. "Who is this Mr. Stevens character?" she asked. "Character?" I said in confusion. "He was the one who saved me from those people." My voice started to slightly raise. "Listen, this Mr. Stevens never taught at that school. Was he a teacher from your elementary school?" "No, I know what I saw." I started to scream, but I couldn't help it. I just couldn't believe what I was hearing. She was telling me that the man who saved me never existed. She sat there in silence, taking notes. I stopped myself before saying anything else. I was just so frustrated. "You're a victim. You must have imagined what you saw that day to cope with the reality of what happened." My frustration was turning into anger. "Why would I imagine something like that?" I said, while trying to hold it all back. "I don't know, but it's treatable. I can prescribe you pills that will take care of all of it." Even then, I knew something was up. Her wording must have given it away. Pills that will take care of it all. It's exactly what she said. It sounded too good to be true. I guess she wasn't wrong, though. She let my parents back into the room and went into more detail about the pills. To be honest, I wasn't paying attention to what she was telling them, but I did hear her say benzodiazepine. I didn't know what they were at the time, but I wish I did. I wish I would have just did a simple Google search, but I didn't. The next day, my mother came into the room to give me my pills. She said to take one every night before going to bed, and I listened. And every night after that, for the next week, I took one pill before going to bed. Surprisingly, I felt better. A lot better. I wasn't having nightmares anymore, and I wasn't constantly thinking about the tragedy of what happened. Finally, after a week, I decided to search up the medicine I was taking, for curiosity's sake. I found out they were sleeping pills. Why would she prescribe me sleeping pills? There had to be another reason. I did more research, and it didn't take me too long before I found out they were linked to memory loss. Memory loss. I tried my best to think back on what happened that day. I could only vaguely remember. I had forgotten so much. I stopped taking the pills immediately. We still visited the therapist every other day. My parents always left the room, so it was always just me and her. After I stopped taking the pills, I noticed how bizarre and eerie her questions were, if you could even call them that. When she would ask me a question, she would answer it and tell me to repeat it. She would do this 3 times and then ask me another question. Did she always do that? Her questions were unsettling too. I remember her asking how many people died. She answered 0 and told me to repeat it. I didn't repeat what she said this time. She only sighed and said, "I told them you wouldn't take those pills." "What?" is all I managed to say. What she did after that only shocked and confused me. She stabbed herself in the left arm right in front of me. It was with the same pen that she was using to take notes. She screamed and my parents burst through the door. She yelled at my parents, told them I had stabbed her. I just sat there, not knowing what to do. Most of what happened was a blur. All I remember is hearing the sound of police cars, the hammering of the judge's gavel, and spending so much of my time isolated in some psychiatric hospital. I'm still here. Medically insane is what they labeled me. Insane. Me. Insane. I knew then without a doubt in my mind that I'm the complete opposite. Typing this has helped me a lot. I've remembered so much of what happened that day, so many details that were previously forgotten, like Frank's name. It all came back to me. I had so many questions. Some of those questions were eventually answered. Yesterday, a man I didn't know visited me. He told me he was a psychologist, but he never gave me his name. "How are you feeling, James?" he asked. "What do you want?" "It's about the pills." "What about them?" My voice started to tremble. "You're 14, aren't you?" I didn't reply. I knew he was just trying to make small talk. "Listen." His tone changed. I could tell he was irritated. I told him this was the only way to make you compliant. "What the hell are you talking about?" "We need you, but you've already seen too much." "Who is we?" I started to yell. That's not important. What's important is what happens next. He took a long pause before saying, there were no bodies found that day because there wasn't a culprit, because there wasn't a school shooting. You just expect me to believe that? It was almost comical hearing it. You're only 14. You have your whole life ahead of you. Right now you have two options. You can either stay here isolated for the rest of your life and eventually go mad, or you could just take the pills once a day for a week, and you can live a normal life again. You've already been here for 2 weeks. Do you understand? I realized something then. Who or whatever was behind this was big. Bigger than me, bigger than you, and maybe even bigger than the government. Maybe it was the government. They had the power to make tragedies disappear. It was obvious they were planning something. Somehow I was involved. Instead of answering his question, I asked him a few on my own. What are in the pills? They'll help you forget about that day. Are they just sleeping pills? They're more than that. What about all those people that died? He took a deep breath and said, they weren't people. What the hell were they then? I yelled. No answer. What about the library? What happened to the bomb? It was no longer necessary. What about Alyssa, Frank, and Mr. Stevens? I asked frantically. They never attended that high school. Do you finally understand? He asked in a monotone voice. There was a long pause until I finally repeated, yeah. There was nothing else I could really do. His vagueness was frustrating. He took a bottle of pills out of his pocket and gave them to me. He said, I'll come and ask you a few questions every day after you start taking the pills. And then he left. I'm typing this now to let you know that I'm not strong enough. I'm not strong enough to live in this hell for the rest of my life. I'm going to take those pills because I want to return to my normal, uneventful life, which is exactly why I won't be naming the school. I don't want any extra attention. There's no one that'll help me. There's still so many unanswered questions, but is it really worth it? Of course not. I just want to go home. Before I go, I thought I'd tell you what became of Alyssa and Frank. Apparently Alyssa, along with her father, had been involved in a car accident. They say their corpses were unrecognizable. Frank's body was found in another state. His death was linked to a string of murders that are still being investigated. Why would they kill him? I don't know. I never found out what happened to Mr. Stevens. Maybe he was a part of the plan and he needed to save me. It creeps me out just thinking about it. Why me, out of everyone else? I doubt that I'm ever going to get an answer to any more of my questions. I don't care though. I just want to put this whole thing past me and live a normal life. Oh my god, I don't think I've ever, oh my god, what the fuck? Okay, that is completely different than what I thought the story was gonna be. This is why I love not looking over stories before I read them in a video, because I love being shocked and amazed by the ending of some of these. Like, I say it all the time, but I just don't understand how these people write these things. Like, these are amazing stories. If you guys want to check out the author, I will have him linked down below. You guys can go check out his other stories. I'm just like, please add on to this. Please continue this story and like make it into something even more, because I'm like, wow. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you have any other stories that you want me to read, go ahead and send them to me. I always have my social media linked down below, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye. Siri, fuck you. I wish I would have just simply, I wish I would have did it. See ya.